Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 28 of Get the Flick Out of Here. I'm Alex Pawlowski, and with me, as always, is Kate Elizabeth. Um, Kate, you contacted me over the weekend with a bargain to be made. You said, I will let you read from movies for 1 week if you agree to review the movie that I pick, you said.
I did.
And it turned out to be that movie was a movie I did not know existed, entitled Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. I was vaguely familiar. Somewhere in the recesses of my brain, there was wasn't there like a web series like entitled that, like from 15 years ago? And that's all I knew of it. I had no idea they had waited a decade plus to adapt it into a feature film. But why don't you tell me and the listeners why you chose to strike such a bargain, and why you chose it to be this particular film?
Well, part of it was because I care about you and your well-being, and I didn't want to make you watch an extra week of stuff when we have Hulk Hogan and Lindsay Lohan around the corner. Separate movies, though together they would be a terrible movie.
That would
But
be interesting, though.
that would be very interesting. But I did not know this movie came out either. The web series came out, I think, about 12 years ago. It was kind of one of the
2010 is what I found when I looked it up.
and it was one of like the early things to go viral, not one of the first,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the earlier things to go viral. And I hadn't heard or seen the movie either, and it came across my radar. And because it's such a funny thing, I had no idea what to expect from it. It definitely qualifies as weird. I was not expecting to be on the verge of tears at like multiple points in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know which way it was going to go because Marcel the Shell with Shoes On is, to me, something that's very funny. But what's so great about it is there's like this vulnerability in this 1 inch shell that's wearing shoes and animated to life with a human narrator slash producer. And I just didn't know what way it was going to go because some of it is just so silly. And then so much of it is like just about this 1 inch shell with shoes trying to take on the world and the elements that they face. And it kind of, to me, I love it because I'm like, anything that makes me think about what something or someone else is up against that would be routine to you, I think is a really special place in any sort of art form. And a 1 inch shell with shoes on certainly fit that. So I did go back and watch the YouTube series so that I could set up the film because there were pieces of it that I kind of recognized carried over. And it's kind of fun. So the first one of these, there's three of them, is you just kind of get introduced to Marcel the Shell, and he says, "I'm a 1 inch shell that wears shoes." And this is my life, essentially. And there's a lot of like, guess what I use to tie skis to my car? A piece of hair. Guess what my skis are? Toenails from a man. There's so many of those. Hang gliding with the Dorito, I think, is my favorite one. A beanbag chair that's a raisin is great. And in the first one, Marcel says, "Guess what I use for a pen?" And the narrator says, "What?" And Marcel says, "Well, a pen, but we have to use the whole family." And that's the first reference that we get to the idea that there's a whole shell family. We also get introduced to Alan, who is Marcel's dog, but is not actually a dog, of course, and is a piece of hair that is attached to a piece of lint. And that's Alan the dog. And they say, you know what they say? Lint is a shell's best friend, which I thought was so wonderful. And my favorite line in the first one is, some people say my head is too big for my body. And I say, compared to what?
Yes.
It's just my favorite thing that is said in the first one. So we do get kind of I don't think they knew it was going to go viral. Nobody knew how to make things go viral at the time this was made.
No.
But this one is kind of more just so introductory and so silly. And then in the second and third ones, we get a little bit more like emotional wherewithal in them. When we're introduced to Marcel in the second one, Marcel is out of breath because he had to walk all the way from the water bottle to where they are, which of course is like 2 feet. But the narrator says, I thought you had a car. And Marcel explains, I didn't have access to the car. And also, the car is a bug. So it's not the most reliable form of transportation. Recounting a time that there was a maple syrup spill in the kitchen. And no matter where you wanted to go, you were just going to end up in the kitchen. And you really just have to want to go for a ride. There is also a bus option. But one time the bus was out of commission because it was a caterpillar that threw up, which cracked me up. And we get a little bit more into this playful guess what, almost like a little kid. And one of the things that Marcel says is, guess what I want, but I won't beg for. And that's a nickname. And Marcel goes on to explain, you can't give yourself a nickname. And I love that because that feels so human for like a shell with shoes on.
There was the scandal on that episode of Seinfeld when George decided to call himself T-Bone, and you're just not allowed to do that. It's just not allowed. Not allowed.
But like in true human shell form, has a nickname picked out. Said that if had a nickname, it would be Ace, and if Marcel had a pen name, it would be Sheldon Conk, which I quite liked, as was asked by the narrator.
Very nice.
We also learn that they have a nickname for the narrator, and that it's Windy. It's kind of implied because that's from a fart. But that's what the community calls the narrator, which is the first introduction we have to a community. And we also learned that Marcel had a sister, but that sister, or used to have a sister, the sister floated away because the sister was asked to hold a balloon, which I love. And that introduces us to Melissa's Law. Melissa was the name of it, but I guess the kids in the community can't hold on to balloons anymore. And then it's just some more fun interactions of, we see Marcel standing on the phone at one point after saying, you want to see me on the phone? And Marcel's literally on the phone. We see Marcel next to the keyboard of a computer, and he's just standing on the Z key. And in the animation, you see Z scrolling across, which is so much fun. And then interactions with the real dog, which Marcel is hiding from, and doesn't love the breath of the dog, has very close interactions with the dog, but also when the dog barks, it's the most terrifying thing in the world. So 1-inch little shell. And then it ends on this note of, guess why I smile a lot? And the narrator says, why? And Marcel says, because it's worth it. And it's just like the sweetest note to end on. And to go from this, like, guess what I use as a hang glide, a Dorito, to the shell now has a sister who floated away. We find out the mode of transportation, and this note of, guess why I smile a lot? Is so sweet. And I also love that we find out about the community. So we do have things in the web series that get called into the movie, which I like. And then the third one is kind of the most emotive of all of them. And you see the most human aspects of this 1-inch shell. They're outside and it looks like it's going to rain, which again in human world is fine. But in 1-inch shell world could be the end of you. So you see Marcel kind of trying to navigate what this rainstorm is going to look like. And Marcel says that Marcel kind of likes it when people get stuck somewhere and they start to tell secrets. And so we find out some of Marcel's secrets, which are, guess where I have to put deodorant? Between my shell and my shoe. That's the hot zone we learn. Yep. There's also just a very funny one-off line of, guess what I call shrimp? The idiots of the sea. It's just so silly. We also find out that Marcel has a gift for the narrator, and it was supposed to be a big reveal, and it's just a grape. Because Marcel has told the community, I know a guy that can eat a whole grape. And the community said, that's BS. But confirms with the narrator that he can, in fact, eat an entire grape. And then we see Marcel, who's allergic to plants, sneeze really, really hard so that he knocks himself into the soil. And Marcel wants to cut the camera. And the narrator says, you're not the one that calls cut, I do. But he's just so embarrassed. It's just like the most heartstring pulls. And then there's an opportunity to go back inside, and the narrator's kind of trying to talk to Marcel, but Marcel sees that there's a crack in the window and is like, let's get back inside. And the narrator's like, oh, great, yeah, we'll go back inside. He's like, let's take advantage of the opportunity to go inside from the storm right now, kind of ushering him back in. And then Marcel sings this beautiful song, which is the first musical debut that we get out of Marcel, and explains that he sings it because a friend that he met at camp lives far away, and it was like their emotional connection. So it's just such a fun little web series. Everything is accomplished in a pretty short amount of time, but where it started to where it ends up, of you like just, I felt so emotionally bonded to this little shell. And we see that a lot in the film, way more than I was expecting. But it's so fun, and we do see flavors of this web series lead into the film, including the fact that this series went viral. It is voiced hysterically by Jenny Slate, who is wonderful. And the voice adds so much to it. And what was so impressive to me was there were parts of this series, especially in the first one, that felt almost improvised. And I don't know the process. I didn't look into it, but I'm so intrigued about what that would be, because if you're animating something to an improvised exchange of someone's voice, that's such an interesting challenge. And I guess that's what it would have had to have been, but it feels so like loose and organic, and even references to like the community, that sounds like something she just said on a whim. Right. And then we see these things kind of come into play in the feature film.
You and I know all about this. On our particular, we have absolute canon things about the ridiculous characters that we do on our Tuesday night review show. They're fully canon. They're truth. However, they just came out of simple one-liner improvs. And it is it's interesting that something like that, as you say, like the community, all of a sudden becomes the entire reason for the film to exist. Mm-hmm. Like if it came out of a simple one-line improv, which I don't know that it did, but I don't doubt that it did, it becomes the entire basis for the film. So I finally was able to watch it yesterday during the day. And I'll tell you, I was not prepared for how much this movie and Marcel largely was going to make me feel stuff.
Yeah.
There is a kind of universal humanity that the shell with shoes on is a part of, in also boils it down to its absolute essence with no artifice. There's the conceit of the film is that there is Marcel lives with his grandmother, voiced by Isabella Rossellini, in another shell, by the way, just so you know, also a shell.
Another shell.
A different kind of shell, but still a shell. And they live together in this house. This house is used to have a couple that lived there. And also, he reveals eventually in the film used to have a whole community, not just his family, but like he mentions neighbors and a kid he went to third grade with, and all of these. Like there's literally hundreds of other shells that used to live in this house, and we find out much later what the circumstances were for them leaving in a hurry. It was all an accident. They did not voluntarily leave. They were moved out of the house in a terrible accident. Never should have happened. But the movie was released in theaters in July, I believe, of this year, and I went over my head. I had no idea it did. But it is available, to rent now on all digital services. I'm sure it'll be on some streaming service eventually, but it is new enough, and I feel like it is one of those things where the movie is best experienced rather than told about. So I'm not going to go into too many spoilery details, but I want to give us a basic idea of this whole thing. So, the house that they live in is now an Airbnb, and they mention a few times of well, Marcel just keeps to himself and doesn't get seen by the other guests at this Airbnb. I don't know when he met Dean, who is living at the Airbnb now. Dean is estranged from his wife, and has a dog, Arthur, who is there some of the time, and some of the time he's with the wife. But Dean is an amateur documentary filmmaker. It's never really explained exactly when he met Marcel the Shell with shoes on, or what his first reaction to Marcel the Shell with shoes on. If it was like a chance meeting, like he flipped on a light and Marcel didn't think he'd be coming into that room, or what. That's never explained to us. By the time, excuse me, by the time we meet them in the film, as the film starts, the documentary is already being filmed. We are watching the documentary. It is the documentary that Dean is making, is the one that eventually gets made and then gets shown to us. But the first thing he's actually making is basically these shorts, but not making them as a piece of artistry, but making them as a documentary of a tiny shell. And then he puts them on YouTube. And for a while, it's 84 people see it. And then eventually it's 38 million people have seen it. And that is apparently what is known as going viral. I really love the interplay with them. It's the same that you get with the shorts, but because the film gives you specifics of how they've met, not the actual meeting, but Dean is an amateur filmmaker who happens to be staying at this Airbnb, and this is where Marcel lives with his grandmother. And
I loved that too, because we don't have that in the shorts, and I for the short form love that they kind of never explain it to us, because it's such a silly concept to begin with. But it's so well justified in this little world that gets created for us. And it's also, to your point, the pitter patter back and forth between Marcel and Dean is so much fun. Marcel's like, oh, why are you staying here? What are you looking for a new house for? And he's kind of wants to keep some personal boundaries, which I love. Marcel's got a little bit of punch to him. He has a little bit of a bite in his sense of humor, which is super fun, because he is so vulnerable throughout so much of the movie and the shorts. But he does have a little bit of snap, which is a really fun offset in his personality.
Yeah. At one point, they mention that the grandmother, again, her name is Connie, I think, because she's a conch shell. But anyway, the grandmother she's not from here. She's from the garage originally. She came over here when she was just a girl by pocket. That's why she has the accent. And I just thought, what a wonderful way of describing like just different lands and how so there are shells in the garage and they all sound like Isabella Rossellini, which is so great.
So funny. It's not an Italian accent; it's a garage accent.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And she's from the garage. That's why she has the accent. But also we hear he gives us on the backside of one of those old-timey mirrors that can flip both ways on a dresser. Marcel has etched all of these people, like a family tree of all the people in the community that have now gone, that he's chiseled somehow into the wood. But this is where we find out about all these people that he would have liked to have said goodbye to. That all these little details about them. Mr. and Mrs. Costa, our neighbors, we had a language barrier, and like just the idea of that is ridiculous, but it's so sweet. But we mentioned that I can't remember the name of Marcel's mother, but his father's name is Mario, so that's obviously Isabella Rossellini's son.
Yeah, it has to be.
And then at one point she does refer to Marcel
as garage name.
Yeah, right. It does. At one point she refers to him as Marcello, which I just love. Yes. That Marcel is like short for Marcello because it's a family name. You know what I mean? Like her great grandfather was named. You could just think of like the backstory of all of these little shell characters. That her like the her great grandfather owned a shoe, like he was a cobbler. He would make all the shoes for the other shells, and his name was Marcello, and so like all that kind of crap. But it's great. But the whole thing about it is that I won't say exactly why, because I think it is especially poignant and very real in a lot of ways. The reason why the family is separated. Marcel without them has had to fend for himself like one of the first things we see him do. We see how he lives. It's all done in cuts and edits, but you'd think it would have to take him hours to do literally anything. There's one thing where one of the ways he gets from place to place, if something is way up on the shelf in a room, he spreads honey on the ground and gets the honey on his shoes and then walks up the wall because his shoes are sticky. But he has to spread the honey every time he's going to do that. Must have a terrible ant problem.
I would only imagine.
Then there's another one where there's apparently a little loose tile on a wall behind a spice rack. And so the only way that he can get into this like little vault of all of his most important things, there's like almonds back there and other things, just in case you need those. But he jumps off the staircase onto a spoon that is holding a persimmon and flips it up to hit the little tile to knock it loose. And then he uses his sticky shoes to walk up the wall to get to the spice. Now, Dean, I'm assuming, could just pick him up and put him up there and remove the thing for him, but that's not what a true documentary filmmaker would do. You never actually influence the environment where you're making things, which I thought was a very interesting little touch.
No, and even in the shorts, like the relationship between the narrator and Marcel, to me there was like this implied, especially in the third one because there's the storm. It felt like there was like this implied protection thing of like, if something were to happen, I would take care of you. But I'm also not gonna like almost patronize you or demean you. Like you figured this out. But that was so fun. The tennis ball to get from place to place, I thought was a nice upgrade from the bug car, which I thought was so cute.
That was great. But one of the first things we see is, how does he get the persimmon to knock up onto the thing? Well, he somehow runs a length of string outside, up the tree, and ties it to a tree. No arms, no hands of any kind. but ties it to the tree, runs it back inside through the window, and then ties it to the end of a KitchenAid mixer, which then like rustles the branches, knocking the persimmons from the tree in the backyard. And this is something we never used to have to do this, but now I got the kitchen. I used to have my family to help me with this, but now I got the KitchenAid mixer. Like it's a very odd that it kind of like has that. It's a substitute. It's not as good. But this is like where he's very proud of all of the little innovations that he's made to make his world work. And yet he's also incredibly depressed because his family is gone. And it was one of the most profound things I've ever heard in a movie or anywhere else. And it really it was like, oh, that's what I would have liked to have told people about myself at a certain time in my life, which is the phrase that Marcel uses is, wow, if I were a different person, I'd be having a great time right now. And like I literally had to pause the movie for like 5 minutes and just sit there with that. Because that's just
it's
like
it's absurdly the simplicity of and the delivery, for lack of a better word, makes you think like this little shell absolutely said this, but all of a sudden there are a few moments in here where you're just like, holy shit. And that's definitely one of them.
Yeah. Because it was just it's a kind of thing of like you don't expect the kind of kinship with a fictitious stop motion snail shell, but that's certainly what I was feeling. I was like, oh yeah, no, I totally felt that before, many times before, and just knowing like this is great, man. If I was somebody else right now, I'd love this.
100%.
But I'm not, so I'm like, this is I can't get into it because it's just whatever. And that kind of feeling of it is very interesting. Just the idea of how the film deals with loss and longing, and not to spoil anything, but the impending loss of an elder loved one, and that all that kind of stuff is very very interesting. Like just it's so pure is absolutely an apt description of it, but it also is just so unflinchingly true, just the way of and it's all just there for right there for you to. And I think that I think that the reason that it works so well, at least it did on me, all of this is that with an actor performing, there is to me a disconnect of it just I can see the artifice. I know the artifice exists, even if I can't see it, even if I can't, if the performance by the actor is amazing, and I don't see the actor acting. I still know it's lines on a script the actor is performing, and so those kind of emotional moments in movies don't always get me because I can't turn that thing off about myself when I'm watching something. But with a tiny little shell somehow tricking me, I had to stop and remind myself, this isn't an actual documentary, but but the shell is a real thing. Like the little tiny fictitious shell creature with shoes on and one eye that looks like a marble coming out of the one part of the shell that you can see. It feels more human than other humans I've seen act these kinds of scenes in movies before.
100%.
And that is unexpected, but makes sense in a weird way, and B, a testament to how brilliant the filmmakers are of the way that they light and shoot and compose the shots of Marcel. The stop motion, just the way that the eye, you could tell there's a like a hesitating blink of one eye, and the eye kind of looking off in one direction and down, and to indicate introspectiveness of, again, a stop motion snail shell with little shoes glued to the bottom of it, and the mouth is just painted on, so it's
Yes.
like it's all added in post. So it's incredible, but also Jenny Slate, and just the again, there's zero artifice at all in her the characterization of the voice, and it's obvious a little character voice that she's doing by this the way that she's
Marcel and I'm Michelle. Yeah.
yes,
So-
but it doesn't at all feel like she's doing this cartoon voice, which is kind of crazy because I'm wearing this because my little girl loves the new Muppet Baby show on Disney Junior. She does the voice of Nanny on the new Muppet Baby show, and she's great in that too. She's it's that's the new Muppet Baby show is really, really excellent. The old one that I grew up on, like, I think relied too much on the gags and, hey, we got footage from Star Wars, let's play it.
Yeah.
The new one is actually really great. About a lot of it is that there's some really interesting human moments among these kids learning how to be people, but they're also all animated Muppets. Like, but Jenny Slate as Nanny does a lot of the opposite of Marcel, which is to, I would love to see a script between Jenny Slate's Nanny talking to Marcel about what Marcel is feeling, because it would be this, because she's a wonderful mentor and she really is able to just get into like where the kids are coming from and talk to them about their feelings. And I think that there's probably a lot of that is because of inhabiting Marcel for so long. She kind of recognizes how she would want somebody to talk to her. But anyway, I think that she's so fantastic in this, and I love all of the scenes that she has with Isabella Rossellini
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
are so wonderful and funny and beautiful and poignant. It really is, like, spoiler alert, it's a movie I can't recommend enough to literally anybody.
Yeah.
Even if you think you won't enjoy it, there'll be something in there that will hit you really hard and you won't be expecting it.
So there's so much in it. There's the voice of Jenny Slate is so important, as you said. Anytime Marcel is out of breath is like my favorite thing that she, because it takes nothing, right? He doesn't have the greatest lung capacity. He's a one-inch shell. But what you just said about like the fact that you have to escape being humans to get to one of the most human films I think I've ever seen is like such an interesting thing, and just goes to show you like how much thought was put into this. It does deal with loss. It does have a happy ending. I do love also Isabella Rossellini playing the grandmother. There's so many touches of a human grandmother in the shell. Like there's a garden, and she's the only one who can really communicate with the bugs. Like she's the only one who, the grandmother's the only one that can kind of maintain this garden. Yep. And then in points, Marcel is trying to communicate with the bugs, and she's like, I don't know how to talk to you. My grandmother's not here right now, kind of thing. Like, it's such a beautiful thing. Isabella Rossellini playing this calm wisdom of a grandmother. And we see that wisdom come into play in a lot of different ways at point plots that we really don't want to spoil. But it's so vital to the film. And there's just this thing too where like it's very possible that maybe I'm overreading into it, but because it's such an emotional film, I'm thinking maybe not. There's something really incredible about how the vulnerabilities of this whole community and Marcel, the things that they're threatened by are things that we would never even think of. A rainy day in the shorts, trying to get from one room to another is always an adventure, right? Like, and I don't know, there's something overarching to that of things that maybe don't feel like a threat or that you don't think about. being a source of vulnerability and being difficult for other people, living things, whatever. Like, I really love that about it, of things you don't even think about in your daily life being something that is incredibly challenging for another living thing, non-living
Yeah.
thing in this case,
Yeah.
is something that's really sweet. And it also is a fun offset of like when there are human interactions in the film, they are kind of just going about their daily life and not thinking about stuff. And it is every day's an adventure for little Marcel. I also loved the use of Diane Stahl.
Leslie Stahl.
I'm sorry, Leslie
Leslie
Stahl.
Stahl. Mhm.
Leslie Stahl. Huge fans. The whole community used to come around and watch Leslie Stahl on television. I'm not going to get into why, because that ventures into spoiler territory. But one thing that was fun was, I think that played off of the fact that Marcel does go viral in this film and went viral in real life. And because it was one of the earlier things to go viral and was done by professionals, it wasn't a cat playing a piano. Marcel literally did have like a weird little press tour and was on a couple of programs. I think 60 Minutes was one of them. And like it was a fun nod to what happened in real life, of all of the sudden this one in Shell was showing up on legitimate programs and in other places, because it was professionally controlled, but something that went organically viral and such a fun thing to play off of. But yeah, I just appreciated that, the community being a piece of that. Some very, very real interactions between an aging Shell and a younger Shell, and how they dealt with that aging, I thought was really sweet. The outwitting of each other, of Marcel discovering things that Connie was trying to hide or whatever, to protect Marcel in certain ways. Marcel's already been through so much, and Grandma Shell doesn't want to expose him to certain things about real life aging. I thought was a beautiful narrative in this overall. And them kind of outwitting each other in the process was great. And the fact that this is like offset by some really funny things, of at one point Dean is up in the tree trying to get a shot, and it turns out it's not on his property, and so the neighbor has to yell him down and is like, I don't have that insured. I don't know what's gonna happen if you fall out. Hey, what are you doing up there anyway? Oh,
Yeah.
like, yeah, you can't say I'm filming a Shell documentary, right? Like, it's so funny. But then when Marcel goes viral, their privacy is invaded, and Marcel's very uncomfortable by that. Like, there are so many emotions that you have in this movie, and they also do a really good job of weaving in some breathing room and some levity to give you pockets of relief. But I really, because of the shorts having both of it, I didn't know which way this was going to go. And this was a gut punch in a lot of ways. Like, it really was a motive from beginning to end.
Yeah. As you say, it does have a happy ending, which is good. But I would say the actual ending, the last very bit part of it, is something that is, to me, so bittersweet, because there's something that Marcel espouses that I think we would all aspire to, but so few of us ever really attain for whatever reason. It's just this philosophy that like, but again, it's never done as like, this is my philosophy. This is just a Shell saying something as simple as whatever. But yeah, it was one of those things where when the credits rolled, I had to like, well, no, let me go back and watch that last scene, because I like that hit me too hard. I can't sit with that. I have to hear it, and I had to do it like 3 or 4 times just to like get all of what, again, this little 1-inch snail shell with an eye stuffed
vehicle.
in it.
It's the
And
best vehicle.
It doesn't make any sense, but it makes perfect sense. And there's also just stuff of I think you knowing what's coming, the realization for Marcel, and not wanting him to be sad. And that
Yes.
was like that. That happens a few times in the movie. The one that's the least spoilerific for me is where he's like, I know how we'll find my family. We'll just get up really high and look for them from above. He's like how I get on the mantle and I can see the entire living room. What's the mantle for your world? It's like, well, I just don't think that's how it works. No, I'm pretty sure it does. Let's go. And so they get in the car, and there's a lot of car sickness, but it's okay, says the driver, because it's very small. But but Marcel keeps puking in the car. And they're in Los Angeles, and they're driving way up on top of wherever this is, in Los Angeles. But it's a big bluff overlooking, just residential area, and you could when you see it, you realize what Marcel is processing.
Yeah.
Of like, oh no, it's not what I thought it was going to be, where I could see everything and it's finite, and oh, there they are. Like, that's not at all. So you recognize, and the whole thing is that this is shot from behind Marcel, so you never even get to see the shell's face. You could just see the way that that shell is looking back and forth, but the way that his head is moving, and it's him, and it was like, so is that it? Is that the whole world? No, no. And
There's a
also,
lot
like,
of these. Yeah.
Dean trying to like break it to him easy, of like, no, that's just one neighborhood in one big city, and there are lots of big cities over the world. Like, you watch a movie and it says Tokyo or Paris or whatever, like those are also big cities in different parts of the world. And then just Marcel goes, oh, and it's just heartbreaking, because it's like he thought, we're gonna get way up high and I'm gonna be able to see my family. It's perfect. Why wouldn't this work? And Dean not being able to like explain to him why it wouldn't, because like, listen to me. As the father of a 5-year-old, sometimes you just gotta show them that it's not gonna work. They will not take the explanation. They're like, that's not the okay, fine, we'll try it. Let's try it. Let's all go out and try this thing you think is it's just not gonna work. And sometimes they have to learn it for themselves. And sometimes you don't want them to, because it'll make them sad. And so
there is
yeah,
like this whole too, there's the specific journey of Marcel trying to find his family, and then there's the overall journey of him exploring a human world, and it yields both heartbreak and like great stuff of innovation and connections with people that can help him and all these things. So it's like, it's just fun. Like, that's part of why it feels so real, is like his environment screws him up so much, but his environment also helps him in a lot of different ways, and he has to be really clever about the ways that it does help him. It's really, really well done. Like, every inch of this, to you talking about too, him getting sick in the car, I was just like, God, they really did put every ounce of detail into this.
Right.
Like, when would he have been in a car? He's not, and his perspective is not looking out the window. He just has big dashboard in front of him. Like, every little piece of this was so carefully crafted, and it's such a beautiful watch. And I thought it was going to be like a fun watch with some emotion. This was an emotional watch with some fun stuff, and also one that I'll revisit at some point too. But I was just like, man, this threw me in places I didn't expect. And I knew it was going to fit the weird criteria of what we did. I didn't know what it was going to do with any other criteria, right. Which was fun about it. And the fact that this came out in 2021 made me think they probably started developing this during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really easy thing to film during the pandemic.
Yeah, because it's,
you know what I mean?
It's you don't need a ton of
nope, you need a whole big crew. It's just a couple people there, but
and there was also this I was just thinking about like how the environment is. There's a continual reiteration, and I don't want to get again too spoilery, but the sound of human voices in an angry tone is something that causes Marcel to go find safety. It's something that causes the whole community at points to go find safety.
Mhm.
And it just made me think of when you're a little kid and you hear people yelling, that's what you want to go do. And Marcel is like, not a kid, but not a full adult. And I think a lot
Mhm.
of times, even as an adult, the sound of human voices makes you want to go find safety in kind of a different way. But there's so much of it is just interactions with the elements that are around
Right.
him. It's so great. It's so great.
I don't know that there's much else we can divulge
You have to go
without
experience it.
you just
You
have to
just got to go
to find
watch
it.
it.
It's yeah, it's like I said, it's now available. You can rent it on any of the digital services, and it's well worth the $5. Just to have, you know, again, one of the most profound viewing experiences that I've ever had, and not in a completely unexpected way. Although
Yeah.
now that we've told you about it, I guess it would be kind of expected for you. But yeah,
But
it's
I
so
don't think there's anything that we can say that can properly
no,
convey
nope,
that an
nope,
animated 1-inch shell with shoes
nope.
on is going to wreck your world and reinstill hope in it
Right,
in the most delightful way. Like there's nothing we could say, even as we're
nope,
withholding spoilers, which I think is important to experience it. There's nothing here that we can say that I think can prepare you for that,
right,
except for maybe the thought that you went into it like I did of, I know the web series. I wonder if this will be funny with some emotion to it. And it's
right,
actually telling you no, it's
right.
emotional with some funny in it.
Yeah, but it's just again, all of it feels just so real, so true, and which is great because it's also there's a commitment to, hey, there are little shells that exist that are like beings, and they all speak, and like, and this is a thing that if the world found out, wouldn't be a colossal giant problem, and not problem, but like, this is insane. How is this even possible? It's like, no, oh yeah, so they're little shells. Anyway,
Yeah.
so Marcel, tell me more about your life. It's not a thing that you would normally expect, but I love that everybody just in the world that this creates completely buys into it. It's perfect.
Yeah, well, and I think the after Marcel goes viral too, people just accept it as he's real. Like
Right.
the people that have watched the viral video are not like, oh, what a cute animation. They're like, oh, there's this talking
Right.
1-inch shell, and we're gonna go try and find him. And
Yeah.
just I believe the animator is Jenny Slate's husband, which is just fun. But her ability to, again, this is such a human movie that uses very little humans, is so incredible. And then I think about, like, if you watch Parks and Rec and you know the character of Mona Lisa, one of my
Hmm.
favorite pieces of character work in the history of the universe.
Right.
And now she's the nanny in the Muppet Babies reboot, and she also
Right.
had a great performance at a rom-com. She has
Oh
an
yes.
incredible.
Something about like adult child or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but it was. I remember reading the reviews of it. I didn't see it, but I remember, and I'm gonna have to go find it now because I remember her being in it and it be getting good reviews. So, and I loved her in this. So,
Yeah, it's just a really, really, some performances are contingent on acting. Some of them
right.
are contingent on your little voice being something
Yep.
that conveys
Exactly.
everything you need it to. Such a different
Yeah.
challenge, but the way that they jumped from the web series to this, I think is an impressive feat. And I just can't keep the flick in here enough. And it was well worth maybe cutting out a horrendous Lifetime movie to make room for this one. I think
Right.
some movie about a high-powered business executive woman coming home to her hometown to fall in love with probably a carpenter or a male baker of some sort who has a
Right.
kid and a widow, to be brought together by the magic of Christmas. We can postpone 74 of those for this wonderful film.
Yep.
It really, it is weird. It fits that criteria. It was very unexpected where it went, but I keep the flick in and some and more.
100%. Yeah. No, this is something that I look forward to sharing with my family when my daughter's a little older and can process this. But it again is also like kids can watch it because there's nothing about it that's be tempted to be like a little risque about something, like to get a cheap joke, but there never is. It's very innocent and pure and true, and I think that there's something really great about it.
Just little like different levels of impact for sure. Watching it as an adult versus watching it as a kid, for sure.
Oh, 100%. But yeah, it might be handy to have the words to process something like this. This is great. I'm sure if I were a different person, I'd really be enjoying myself. Like if I knew that was a thing that other people thought, that it wasn't just me being crazy. And that I maybe would have had a better time in high school. I don't know. Like it's
yeah, it does. It this whole movie does make you feel less alone somehow. It is, again, really the does. Device of a 1-inch shell with shoes on is like it's such a funny little delivery, but it's impressively human.
Anyway, so there we go. Another movie where we didn't go point by point. We didn't talk for 2 hours. It's not a 35-year-old cult classic or something you never heard of that is just wacky beyond repair. This is just but don't get the wrong idea. We're right back to reviewing trash coming up soon. We'll delve into every aspect of the plot, spoil the whole thing for you, and tell you why you should get the flick out of here, but not this one, not this time. This time we're keeping it in. But I'm almost certainly next week and every week after that, for the foreseeable future, we will be telling you to get the flick out of here. Goodbye, everybody, and have a good weekend.
RESPECT. Click the subscribe button and find out what it means to me. Nah, that doesn't have a ring to it. But if you like videos about real news stories that are funny, stupid, or weird, subscribe now.